One-way flights out of Russia have been rocketing in price and selling out fast after President Vladimir Putin ordered the immediate call-up of 300,000 military reservists. Putin's announcement, in an early morning TV address on Wednesday, raised fears some men of fighting age would not be allowed to leave the country. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said the call-up would be limited to those with experience as professional soldiers, and students and conscripts would not be called up. Watch the latest news and stream for free on 7+. The Kremlin declined to comment on whether the borders would be closed to anyone who is subject to the mobilization order and asked people to be patient as the law is clarified. Meanwhile, Google Trends data showed a spike in searches for aviasals, Russia's most popular flight booking site. Direct flights from Moscow to Istanbul in Turkey and Yerevan in Armenia, both destinations which allow Russians to enter without a visa, were sold out on Wednesday, according to Aviasal's data. Flights from Moscow to Istanbul via Turkish Airlines were either all booked or unavailable until Sunday. Loading tweets some routes with stopovers, including those from Moscow to Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, were also unavailable, while the cheapest flights to Dubai cost more than 300,000 rubles, odd $7,342, about 5 times the average monthly wage. Typical one-way fares to Turkey shot up to almost 70,000 rubles, compared with a little over 22,000 rubles a week ago, Google Flights data shows. The head of Russia's tourism agency said no restrictions have been imposed on traveling abroad so far. Aeroflot, the country's flag-carrying airline, said it was not limiting ticket sales. Hundreds of Russian protesters detained. More than 500 people have been detained across Russia in a crackdown on anti-war protests across 24 cities, according to the independent monitoring group OVD Info. About 100 arrests were made at protests in St. Petersburg after Putin's announcement of a partial mobilization. Photos released on OVD Info's Telegram channel showed police in St. Petersburg using batons against protesters. Videos show police attempting to contain a crowd gathering at Isakievsky Cathedral behind barriers, amid chants of no mobilization. Videos from Moscow showed protesters being carried away by the police at a demonstration in the center of the city. One video posted by a journalist from the Moscow web publication The Village includes dozens of people chanting "Let him go" as one man is carried away. There was also video from the city of Yekaterinburg of a struggle between police officers and protesters. As of 8 p.m. Moscow time, 535 people had been detained in 30 cities, according to OVD Info. Arrests took place in Irkutsk and Krasnoyarsk, Yekaterinburg, Chelyabinsk, Novosibirsk, Ulan-Ude, Tomsk, Ufa, Perm, Belgorod, and Moscow, according to the OVD Info tally. Moscow prosecutor's office published a statement Wednesday warning citizens against participation in protests, threatening those who did with up to 15 years in jail. Loading tweet Putin's nuclear threat to the West not a bluff. In the same TV address on Wednesday morning, Putin warned the West he is not bluffing when he says he is ready to use nuclear weapons to defend Russia. If the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, we will without doubt use all available means to protect Russia and our people. This is not a bluff, Putin said. He said, without providing detailed evidence, the West was plotting to destroy Russia, engaging in nuclear blackmail by allegedly discussing the potential use of nuclear weapons against Moscow. He accused the US, the European Union and Britain of encouraging Ukraine to push military operations into Russia itself. In its aggressive anti-Russian policy, the West has crossed every line, Putin said. This is not a bluff. And those who try to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the weather vane can turn and point towards them. The address followed a critical Russian battlefield defeat in northeastern Ukraine and showed Putin was doubling down on what he calls his special military operation. In essence, Putin is betting that by increasing the risk of a direct confrontation between the US-led NATO military alliance and Russia, a step towards World War III, the West will blink over its support for Ukraine, something it has shown no sign of doing so far. Putin has repeatedly railed against the US for driving NATO's eastward expansion, especially its courting of ex-Soviet republics such as Ukraine and Georgia, which Russia regards as part of its own sphere of influence. Putin said top government officials in several unnamed leading NATO countries had spoken of potentially using nuclear weapons against Russia. He also accused the West of risking nuclear catastrophe by allowing Ukraine to shell the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is under Russian control, something Kyiv has denied. Referendums announced Russia has given support to plans by separatists in Ukraine to hold referendums, paving the way for the annexation of swathes of additional territory. In what appear to be choreographed requests, Russian-backed officials across 15% of Ukrainian territory, an area about the size of Hungary or Portugal, lined up to request referendums on joining Russia. The self-styled Donetsk and the Luhansk People's Republics, which Putin recognized as independent just before the invasion, and the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions on Tuesday asked for votes. Luhansk and Donetsk officials said the referendums would take place on September 23 to 27. Asked about the referendums, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, "From the very start of the operation, we said that the peoples of the respective territories should decide their fate, and the whole current situation confirms that they want to be masters of their fate." Dmitry Medvedev, who served as Russian president from 2008 to 2012 and is now deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, backed the referendums, which he said would change the path of Russian history and allow the Kremlin more options for defense of what he said would become Russian territory. Encroachment onto Russian territory is a crime which allows you to use all the forces of self-defense, Medvedev said in a post on Telegram. This is why these referendums are so feared in Kyiv and the West. It is equally important that after the amendments to the constitution of our state, no future leader of Russia, no official will be able to reverse these decisions. Ukraine said the threat of referendums was naive blackmail and a sign Russia was running scared. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff Andriy Yermak said, "This is what the fear of defeat looks like. The enemy is afraid, and obfuscates primitively. Ukraine will solve the Russian issue. The threat can only be eliminated by force. Ukraine says it will not rest until every Russian soldier is ejected from its territory." Kyiv says it will never accept Russian control over its territory and has called on the West to supply more and better arms to fight